Here's the last portion of the project, our Group 8, Part 3. We each looked up part of it. I looked up talks or things from church leaders about our topic, and Bailey looked up past readings in the class. Allison looked up laws. Again, our situation was a 5th grade boy named Jimmy wants to be in the girls' sex ed class. And so as a teacher, we call the parents and make sure it's okay, and then let him attend the girls' sex education class. That was what we decided our solution was. Allison found some really good websites about transgender rights, the transequality.org. There are some federal case laws and some lists of rights that you have. She'll go into that later in our paper. Bailey found a talk in week 2 from Elder M. Russell Ballard called Doctrine of Inclusion. It was awesome for our problem because it talks about just loving your neighbor and accepting them. And that was the main thing she found from the readings that applies to our situation. Her quote that she included was, "As members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we understand that we are perceived by some to be a peculiar people. Our doctrines and beliefs are important to us. We embrace them and cherish them. I am not suggesting for a moment that we shouldn't. On the contrary, our peculiarity and the uniqueness of the message of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ are indispensable elements in offering the people of the world a clear choice. Neither am I suggesting that we should associate in any relationship that would place us or our families at spiritual risk. We must understand, however, that not everyone is going to accept our doctrine of the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. For the most part, our neighbors not of our faith are good, honorable people, every bit as good and honorable as we strive to be. They care about their families just like we do. They want to make the world a better place just like we do. They are kind and loving and generous and faithful just as we seek to be." Nearly 25 years ago, the First Presidency declared, "Our message is one of special love and concern for the eternal welfare of all men and women, regardless of religious belief, race, or nationality, knowing that we are truly brothers and sisters because we are sons and daughters of the same eternal Father." I like that quote. I like how it talks about treating everyone as a child of God. Allison found some interesting information about gender rights. When teaching about bullying and how to treat others, it has become important to teach about gender bullying and their rights. This should be done at the beginning of the school year, with all other classifications of bullying. All students are given certain rights in the school system. Transequality.org talks about these rights, and then she mentions some of the rights that these students have, these transgender students. Students are allowed to be treated according to how you personally identify, even if there has been no physical changes made. They definitely have a right against protection, or a right of protection from bullying. And they have the opportunity to use any bathroom and locker facilities according to what they associate with. I also found this somewhere else. I can't remember where. Very importantly, they're allowed at all educational possibilities that any student has. They're allowed to dress however they associate. They're allowed to create clubs that support their decision. With this in mind, allowing the student to attend the female class for sex education should have been handled very differently. The teacher, this is an alternate suggestion that she came up with, and I think this is really good. The teacher should have passed out permission slips that parents signed with the class preference given as a choice. The student should have never had to have asked to attend the class as it was starting and go to a meeting with his parents and the teacher. This should have been planned for in advance from a teacher that is culturally aware. That's something that I wouldn't have thought of doing, so I'm glad that Allison came up with that idea. That's a really good idea. Title IX protects all students from sex discrimination, and due to this law, a teacher cannot assume gender. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, protects all students in keeping their private information confidential. Because of this, Jimmy would have had no reason to fear choosing which class to go to on the permission slip. Because bullying and discrimination theoretically should have been taught at the beginning of the semester, Jimmy would have had no reason to fear being bullied. The teacher should have acted in advance on behalf of all the students. These are really good ideas to apply when we're teachers, I think. To address bullying at the beginning of the school year, and then to be culturally aware, as Allison said. Esther said, "Honestly, this project was hard mentally for me because I have strong moral views about the laws of God, and I believe that He has given us our gender. When I was preparing to make the video showing a good way to respond to our situation for our part 2 video, I really had to think about what I would really do in that situation if I were a teacher in that situation. I was given a script by one of the other group members and asked to make it into the video, but I did not feel comfortable with some of the wording and attitudes. I did some research on what church leaders have said on these topics, and one of the resources I found was a BYU devotional given by Elder Ronald A. Rasband, where he talks about the balance between believing what we feel we should believe and allowing others to make their own choices without discriminating against them. He talks about loving and being respectful and fair to others. He also, Elder Rasband, mentioned a press conference, I believe it was January 2015, given by leaders of the church, Sister Marriott, Elder Christofferson, Elder Oaks, and Elder Holland, who talked about the balance between the freedom to believe what we want and the responsibility to respect others and allow them freedoms and opportunities. They indicated that the church encourages governments to make regulations dictating that LGBT people should not be discriminated against in terms of housing, employment, and public accommodation, while also preserving the rights of religious believers to freely share or express their religious beliefs without being targeted by supporters of LGBT rights. I liked how it talked about how both Elder Rasband and these other church leaders at the news conference talked about there to be the importance of there being some compromise, discussion, respect, rather than one group being dominant or favoring one of the other group at the total expense of the other. Elder Rasband mentioned that the church was happy about legislation that Utah made that allowed both LGBT people and religious people certain rights. Specifically it allowed LGBT people rights to housing and employment and public accommodation, and it also allowed religious people to express their beliefs. I realized from reading these that it's okay and appropriate and necessary to respect the beliefs and lifestyle choices of others, while at the same time holding to our own standards. Just because I respond a certain way to someone, in this case letting the 5th grade boy in our situation attend the girls' class, does not mean I support the belief, just that I respect him and his parents and their choices. So I changed the script that I made the part 2 video about to better reflect our beliefs. I also found some other interesting things about transgender students. There was a book about the 2015 National School Climate Survey, which was a survey given to some middle and high school LGBTQ students and students who had LGBTQ interests, and it asked them what their experiences were and how they felt, or if they were respected at school, if they were discriminated against, or knew people who were discriminated against. That's a report that has been done every 2 years since 1999. From reading this, I realized that too often transgender students and other LGBTQ students don't feel comfortable at school, and it negatively affects how they feel and their academic experience. definitely as a teacher, I wouldn't want any student to feel discriminated against or to have fewer academic rights or opportunities just because of something like this. The report mentioned issues such as students feeling unsafe or unwelcome at school due to negative remarks made by others, physical, verbal, electronic, or sexual harassment or assault by other students, negative remarks made by teachers and other school staff, and school policies that were discriminatory. These things sometimes negatively affected their grades, how many days of school they missed, their self-esteem, and their desire to continue attending school and to graduate. Some schools are more supportive than others. Some of the supports that some schools provided or had available to help mitigate these effects were gay-straight alliances, curriculum that was more friendly of LGBT individuals and history and people in general, staff members and teachers who were supportive and that students could turn to if they felt threatened, and anti-bullying and anti-harassment policies that specifically mentioned sexual orientation and gender identity and gender expression. These things helped LGBT students so that they heard fewer negative or discriminatory remarks, and staff members intervened more often if there were negative comments or action being made. Students did better academically, students felt safer and more accepted by others at school, and felt more like a part of the school community. From the National School Climate Survey report, I learned that it's so important for staff and teachers to support these students, or at least to be a little more accepting. They're people just like us. They're children of God. As Bailey mentioned in her quote, in the quote by Elder Ballard, and they are entitled to equal educational opportunities without feeling targeted or harassed or unwelcome. If I were in their shoes, I would not want people to say or do unkind things, and even if I knew people were mentally judging me, I would feel a little uncomfortable. This does not mean that anyone should compromise their standards, but it does mean that we need to be more accepting and love and treat them as the Savior would. We learned a lot of good things from this project about respect and about the laws that transgender students and the rights that they have. And those are my references. So that's our part 3.